Hi, and welcome to the Courage Made Simple podcast. I'm Margareta Kull, a mother of 3 courageous young women and a courageous leader trainer. For the past 20 years, I've helped hundreds of leaders from over 50 countries, from senior executives to aspiring changemakers, find the courage to face challenges at work and at home. I know firsthand that leading isn't just about work. Whether it's guiding a team at work, setting boundaries at home, showing up for the people who matter most, or navigating other tough decisions, courage is essential in every part of life. It's how we become the people we want to be. This podcast is a space to explore the messy questions of being a leader at work and at home. Through insights, tools, and personal stories, we'll help you find your courage. If you're ready to move from feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or frustrated to becoming a more confident, capable, and courageous leader, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear from you. What's a challenge or question you'd like me to explore in this podcast? Send me a DM on LinkedIn or Instagram at Margareta Kull. I'd love to hear your thoughts and answer your questions in future episodes. Today's episode is about navigating as a leader when things feel unclear, pressured, or even manipulated, a challenge many leaders face. My guest today is once again Jackie Johnson, Executive Director of ICSA, International Cultic Studies Association, who joined us in episode 9. There, we talked about what it was like growing up and living with the Jehovah's Witnesses organization, and how she found the courage to leave after many, many years. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I highly recommend going back to it. Jackie helps people recovering from cults and other high control groups, and she also has her very own story of courage. In short, she grew up in a childhood full of rules, control, and social isolation, where guilt was always present. She shared her experience of being shunned from the congregation twice, losing the freedom to make her own choices at a young age, and how, as an adult, she worked to find her own identity, education, and family life outside the organization. So, welcome back, Jackie.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Margareta.
Today we're diving deeper, exploring leaders through the lens of complexity, pressure, and the moments when it's easy to either rush ahead or disconnect. Building on what we talked about in the last episode, let's explore how your story can guide us in navigating moments that feel confusing, high pressure, or controlled. I was wondering now if we could move into the area of, what can leaders who want to make good choices and lead courageously, what can we learn from your journey? How do we notice early signs, for example? What should we keep an eye out for? What I write in my book is also about a courageous leader being, you need to be willing to see. So what similarities do you see between high control groups and some company cultures, etc.?
With that question, there can be a lot. Part of my private practice is being an expert witness in legal cases that, are in like the cultic realm. And I say that to say that, I've dealt with, and right now I'm dealing with working on a very large case with a major corporation who was under scrutiny, a lawsuit for running like cultic practices within the corporation. And I don't want to name it here, but it's an organization that people use every day.
So what does that look like? I can't even perceive what you're talking about when you're
right.
a cultic.
So in this particular case, just to use it as an example, there was one department and the department head was running his department like a cult, so they were isolated from other departments and individuals. There was this kind of like dynamic setup of us versus them. So you can't talk to anybody, you can't complain to anybody, you can't, share any information. They were coerced into doing some very illegal, harmful things for which a number of the managers and spent some prison time. So the employees were coerced into doing illegal things that were harmful to customers, and it's hard to talk about without giving details, but I don't want to
Yeah. But
distract
I
from the
can still
message. Like,
remain to think of some scandals.
yeah,
Talking about what you're talking about. I'm thinking, but I suddenly forget the name of it. It's this US bank that where you had a huge scandal 10, 15 years ago. Maybe they were forced to open accounts that were.
yeah, ethical stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and secretive, and many of the dynamics that we know, in the research about the way that cultic groups operate: high control, high demand, isolation, coercion, punishment, all those things can exist in any system. It can exist in a family, it can exist in a book club, it could exist, anywhere, like in a strict hierarchy where there's like a leadership and the people under, like, there's a lot of fear, a lot of control. So this can really happen in corporations or government systems. I mean, government systems for sure, I could see a lot of this because, and I've worked in government most of my career, the hierarchical structure of a governmental agency or department can be very fearful, very, very hierarchical. There's a lot of almost authoritarianism, and it's like in our department, we keep things secret and safe, and, information doesn't go up and you don't go outside the boundaries and emailing people. And this is the way we do things here. And it can become really isolative and toxic. So for sure that stuff exists. So leaders have to be aware that they're not playing into behaving that way. I could see, people not even knowing about coercive control or cultic dynamics and thinking that this is the way that they're going to be an effective or efficient leader, keep their department under control, especially if they have the need to control things or they have a fear of the hierarchical structure themselves, or want to be kind of, like in a self-preservation mode. I could see things becoming extremely um oppressive, for employees working under a manager, or a leader like that. So unfortunately, it's not going to get you anywhere. Eventually it's going to come crashing down. It's a system of abuse. It's exploiting power and control. It's, manipulation and abuse. Nothing is going to work out well when you're, leading an organization or even a department or even a team in that way. I mean, it could be as small as like an assigned team of coworkers and someone's going to move into a leadership role. And if that person, even on a team of peers who may be leading a work group or something, has the tendency to abuse power and control and exploit people and manipulate, it's going to happen.
But it's interesting, though, how slowly it happens very often. Because people are intelligent. Most people are intelligent. And still, we have this baggage.
Mhm.
So we adapt. We start to adapt a little. And
Yes.
then we're still like the fish in that water, aren't we? And we don't see it, and we tell ourselves it's not as bad, and we don't see reality for what it is. It's just scary how that grows. I don't know, it's so common that I talk to senior managers about toxic work environment and how to stop it and how do I deal with this colleague and
Mm. Yeah. I mean, that's where coincidentally I'm really happy about, my two professional areas, how they dovetail together. Um, my doctoral program was on clinical leadership and clinical practices, but I did my dissertation on organizational culture and climate, and how that affects turnover in, mental health organizations or human service agencies. But through that learning and research, the whole field of organizational culture and climate and organizational change teaches what creates a toxic versus healthy work environment. And so it dovetails really nicely with the whole like coercive control and high demand, high control environments. Because to have a healthy culture and climate, you have to ensure that you're providing everything that's basically in opposition to cultic dynamics.
You do. What do you think that looks like?
Some of the main points, the research, that I did my dissertation on, is older now, but it's probably the same, is ensuring that there's continued education, that people don't get stuck with limited knowledge, that their sources of information and continued education are well researched, so that they can continue to have critical thinking and open-mindedness, that they have autonomy to do their jobs, that leadership is approachable, when there's a problem, that there's a flattened hierarchy rather than a strict hierarchical structure. A lot of those things where people don't feel coerced or forced to be part of the group or the environment. People can kind of come and go. It's not like an us versus them, mentality in the workplace. So, a lot of these things, when you study both fields, both bodies of literature, you can really see how they can dovetail. And I learned that really with this big case that I was, working on with this major corporation about, wow, I could see if I was looking at it through organizational change, I'm like, oh my goodness, like everything in the research about organizational climate and culture was violated. And then from, coercive control and high demand, high control, it's like, wow, the abuse of power and control is evident like in every single way that we know about cultic environments. So, it's nice to be able to see it from both views, because even if a leader doesn't think that they're interested in cults or that their organization is not a cult, of course, they're going to think that, and we don't need to label it as that,
No.
but
Ah.
we're really talking about creating and maintaining a healthy environment for the people who are in our space, not exploiting them, not abuses of power and control.
What is also key in that, I think, which is of course what my work is all about, it's about finding beings. To be able to do that, you need to be curious both about yourself and about other people. Because if you're not aware of yourself or curious about yourself, it's hard to say how aware we are of ourselves, because it's hard to say what we're not aware of. But if we're not curious about ourselves, it's so easy that our fears, for example, then, of lack of control, affects the decisions we make and affects then the teams and the environment and all of that. And then at the same time, we have so many executives and managers who are scared of being curious about themselves, especially in front of other people. They call it soft skills. They pretend to
Yes.
diminish something that's crucial to an environment.
Yes.
They call it soft skills.
Yes.
I'm like, I usually laugh when I hear that. And I think, and I say, I don't think it's very soft, to be honest. I think you're avoiding it because it's not soft. It's hard.
Right. Yes, and it's crucial. It's not
It is
like
very-
it's, optional. Yeah.
Well,
To me, like, the courage comes in at the very foundational level where you allow yourself to start opening your mind to learning about yourself, to being able to not shut down criticism, whether it's self-criticism or criticism from others, where you may need to take a hard look at something, because yes, sometimes it takes courage to pull the plug and go ahead with the final act of something and behave differently. But you're not going to get there unless you have the courage to spend the time learning about yourself and how you need to get to the point where
yeah,
you act differently,
yeah. You
And
need to
that's
be prepared,
yeah.
but to see both your blind spot and those who are not so blind, but you still need to look at them.
Yeah, for sure. And to be willing to think about things that are difficult and uncomfortable. I saw that a lot when I was working in New York State government. People were just not willing to take a look at themselves. It can be scary to do that, because then what does that mean? And I also see that with some of my family who are still Jehovah's Witnesses, who,
Yes.
when I left, expressed that they wish they could leave and they've always been unhappy and no, they start thinking about it and they shut down. So in any case, you come upon this moment where you say, oh my goodness, I might be doing something wrong, or there might be a problem that I need to take a look at. And you can either pursue that or shut it down.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people shut it down, not just because it's scary to do that, but it puts an onus on you. Like once you say, yes, I'm going to start looking at myself and I'm going to start seeing what I need to change, or do I need to do things differently, or I'm going to learn about myself. And then you do discover those things. Then what do you do with it? Now you have this knowledge of something about yourself. And now you either have to do something about it, or you have to convince yourself to ignore it. And I think a lot of people, I mean, that's a real conflict. It's like cognitive dissonance.
I
Like
could
you're
not agree more. I mean,
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think one of the most powerful questions we can ask ourselves is, what would I do in this situation if I were courageous? And if you dare to ask yourself that question, it's very hard to go back
Right.
and
Yeah.
not act on it. You realize, this is what I ought to do. I've even said it to myself or out loud. And then to not do it is even more painful than not having seen it at all.
Right. And having that knowledge. I mean, the whole thing of cognitive dissonance as a psychological phenomenon and process is, you're now faced with information that is too conflictual or hurtful or harmful for your brain to even process. And so your brain doesn't process it because it's going to leave you in a state of inner turmoil, and you got to get over that. I mean, I remember, when I first left Jehovah's Witnesses, having some not so heated, but some heated discussions with my parents about things I discovered about the organization. I could visibly see them shutting down and not, and like physically refusing to hear anything I was saying. Like maybe they heard, this,
Yeah.
but it wasn't getting in here. They did totally shut down because it was too frightening for them to open up their mind, consider what I was talking about, think about it, because then their whole life would be in question.
Now,
And so
give
to
up their
me,
martyrdom. It's just said,
yes.
that's exactly what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, why would I not? How could I not talk to them about, covering up child sex abuse? I mean, those conversations got heated, especially between my dad and me, because he was an elder in the congregation for decades, and I know that he knew. And so, and he would just shut down because it was too fearful and scary to actually engage in talking about it, thinking about it, listening to it, because then it's like, oh no, now what do I do? So people just shut down at that very first level and then they're stuck. So to me, I guess I say all that to say, to me, that's where like the first opportunity for courage has to start.
I think that there is nothing, if we're talking about the organizational world, I'm thinking there is, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, that of course includes our cults for sure. There's nothing more costly. We can talk about money, we can talk about lives, we can talk about anything than our defenses that are just keeping us away from seeing things, from leaving
Yeah.
our comfort zone. And that's exactly what you're talking about. I have all these executive talking, coming and talking about, how do I lead all these people who play the victim? And that's what we're talking about, isn't it? But they're costly. To stay in our own comfort zone and not dare to be curious about ourselves, the situations we're in, and what would be best and what will be best for other people, that is costly.
Very costly. With us as an organization, the International Cultic Studies Association, we've been trying to widen the discussion from cults to coercive environments, because whether it's a religious cult or a book club or a corporation or a governmental work environment, whether it's a family system, whether it's a gang. Kids get caught up. Knew this from my years in juvenile justice, when I worked in New York State, the juvenile justice system. A gang is the same thing. It's like there's coercion, there's the abuse of power and control, there's us versus them. And a lot of times we would get kids in our juvenile justice system. A lot of them were gang affiliated, of course. And it was trying to get them to have the courage to even consider that they were being controlled, and how did they leave this gang and this environment that they were in, because the stakes were so high. I mean, you were already in jail as a kid, but number one, it could cost you your life when you go home if you stay, here. So that's another reason I'm a big believer in saying, like, the courage has to come from just being willing to deal with the uncomfortability of talking about where you are, and listening to the situation you're in, and considering doing something different. If you can't even tolerate like a low level discussion about it, honestly, you're never going to get to the point of making a change or making a difference.
A courageous leader is a courageous listener.
Yes. Yes, for sure.
And that's not comfortable. It's
No.
being courageous is never comfortable. It's impossible to be courageous and comfortable at the same time. It's part of it.
I think for courageous leaders, people have to be willing to have a conversation about what is leadership. There's so many different leadership styles and types and all of that, and we just need to get textbooks to see evidence of that. But, it's really about, what atmosphere do you want for your, the people you quote lead? Like, what atmosphere do you, and you're part of it. So what atmosphere do you want for yourself?
Yes, yeah. That's just part of being a defense, isn't it? When we start to blame others for creating the culture.
And if you think of leadership, in terms of a flattened hierarchy, you're just as much affected by the climate and culture that you set as the people that you lead. But you have to be willing to say, what is leadership to me? And if I need to change my style, am I willing to think about that and talk about it? Or do I have fear that I'm going to lose control and that my own job is going to be at risk because things are going to fall apart? It makes sense to think about it and talk about it anyway, because you have to come up with a plan or a strategy before you do anything anyway. So
Yeah, I was thinking the same. You need to reflect on it anyway.
yeah. 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 Unless you want to just be someone who's like blind and going through the motions, but then you're a victim of your own kind of ignorance and unwillingness. Whatever you create is a product of your unwillingness to really take a look at things from a courageous.
So we're saying courage is really about being curious about yourself, isn't it?
It has to start there. Yeah.
Jackie, the other day, I had a conversation with a manager who feels like he's been badly manipulated by someone even more senior. He's chosen to leave the company and is eager to join another company. I asked him, how can you ensure that you're not joining someone with the same behavior as your previous boss had? And that is his process at the moment. That's where he's at. I left him with that, What are your thoughts about manipulation? Because I think it's something we really need. I can also share that many years ago, I started this business 30 years ago, been training courageous leaders for 20 years. It started with me training managers to coach. And what I noticed was that when they came to coach and to learn how to coach, some of them even mentioned out loud that they came to learn to manipulate. It was unbelievable to me. It was unbelievable that people would want to do it. And it was even more unbelievable that they'd be sorry enough to say it, stupid enough to say it out loud.
Mm.
And that's when I realized, oh, time to go back to the drawing board and design a program that starts with personal awareness, self-awareness.
Mhm.
I'm really curious about manipulation. And you have lived in a system of manipulation, it sounds like, for many, many
Yeah.
years. What advice would you like to give leaders and also people living in toxic environments and seeing manipulation or also avoiding it themselves, What are your thoughts on all of that?
I mean, first, let's just say, I'm sure we'll all agree, manipulation is a form of abuse. You're trying to usurp someone's autonomy, their sense of self agency, all of that, to get something that you need or want. And that's abusive, you know?
I want to stress what you're saying there because I think,
Yeah.
yeah, it's abusive behavior. I think that's really important for people to hear.
I think it's also, in some cases it can be arrogant.
Yeah.
Because in some cases the manipulation is like, I know better than you and you should listen to me. The manipulator is elevating himself above the person he's manipulating, or could be selfish. There's something that they need, either overt or covert, subconscious or perfectly conscious, of getting someone's needs met. They'll manipulate. And I also think that, manipulative behavior can be purposeful or it can just be learned behavior and people are not aware that what they're doing is manipulative.
So what is manipulative?
I don't know. To me, manipulative is when, one person, on a personal level, it's like you just won't accept that someone is in a disagreement with you, and you try a lot of different ways, whether it's through conversation and trying to convince them, or whether it's stronger, you're trying to coerce them, or even stronger than that, and abuse them into seeing something your way or doing something you want. And you're just forcing yourself on that person, forcing yourself and your will.
Isn't it also, Jackie, that you pretending somehow? There's something about pretending in manipulative behavior. I think that you're pretending it's for their good, but it's actually for your good. It's for your sake.
In psychological and emotional manipulation, yes, for sure. I mean, you're absolutely not. I don't think that's an element of every manipulative act, but in some, yes. And I think that's kind of what I meant in terms of the arrogance of it in
Mm.
situations where that's occurring. There's an arrogance, about this is for your own good. I know better than you, and really trying to convince or coerce the person to do something that's really about you. And so manipulation totally abandons the respect that one person has for another. Like if you really respect someone, you're going to allow them to be an autonomous person. You can express your opinion of disagreement. You can ask, how you can help. You can advise, but in the end, a person's decision should not come with punishment or judgment from someone who they know and love and care about. And it is very selfish.
Mm.
Manipulation is a selfish act. There's been, especially when I worked in juvenile justice, talk about, the kids are manipulative. Of course, there was always one conversation was, he's not manipulative. He's just trying to get his needs met. That's such a horrible thing to say. And it's like, what's with the stigma around the word manipulate or someone's being manipulative? If they're being manipulative, of course they're trying to get their needs met. Like, why are we so afraid to just say something for what it is?
Yes.
If we can't say it for what it is and we can't identify it, then how do we even start talking about it? So, okay, so this kid can pull all these strings and head games and lies, and this, for example, because yes, I understand he's been traumatized and he's trying to get his needs met, and this is how he learned to do so. But it's still abusive. It's still manipulative and it's still abusive. So to me, manipulation is a form of abuse that, can be on a continuum of a purposeful or not, degree of harmfulness or not. But
It's hard
you
to
know,
it's
it's
hard to see, though. I'm thinking about this person who's now wanting to move into another company and has obviously got someone he's keen on working with. How can you see that in an interview, in a couple of interviews, when you're on the spotlight? It's hard, isn't it?
very hard. It's especially hard when you're in a situation where you feel like you need to garner the approval of someone, because then you have a tendency to kind of ignore those instincts or feelings that you're not being treated or respected properly. You try to abandon that because whether it's self-preservation or whatever, you want to please the person, whether it's your boss or you're interviewing for a position, or even, your subordinates, you want to remain in their favor because you think they'll do more work for you or whatever, and sometimes that manipulation can go the other way where it's really your subordinates or your staff or whomever who end up manipulating you and holding you hostage as a leader, because you're afraid that if you don't give in or if you're not nice enough or whatever, they're just not going to produce for you, And so sometimes you got to deal with that, too. I was going to say, I think manipulation is, unfortunately, really, really woven into the culture of work because so many things depend on productivity and people keeping their jobs so that they can put food on their own tables for themselves and their family. And, it's part, I think, of the human condition of just survival to do ultimately to do what you need to do to proverbially get the job done,
Yeah.
literally or proverbially. And if you're not careful, you can fall into the slippery slope of getting comfortable with manipulating people or getting comfortable with exploiting power and control and become abusive and toxic in your own system.
Oh, yes, because you live in it, so you become it yourself. That's what you mean. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that and I mean, even leaders have their own, self-preservation needs to produce on behalf of the company
Mhm.
and to keep their own job and to make sure that their staff is producing or they meet their numbers or their KPIs and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
all of that.
When things start getting difficult and the pressure is on, it's easy for people to slide into authoritative and authoritarian ways kind of without even like, their emotions bring them there,
Yes.
like, their fears bring them there, and they may really care about their department and their staff and everything as people and probably have relationships with them, but if that emotion, fear, and self-preservation starts kicking in, it could be really easy to fall into controlling people in an unhealthy way, through manipulation.
So true, so true. So what advice would you give people who live in this situation? I mean, it could be at work, it could be at home, and also people who see it from it could be someone within a team, for example, and you see it going on, or in another team. What do you think they can do?
First thing people can do is acknowledge it and sit with it for a little bit, meaning try to really connect with it. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times we feel something and sense something, especially if it's egregious or harmful, and we just react right away. But that's like an emotional, it's a trigger and a reaction. I think to really notice you're being manipulated or there's some manipulation in the system, you have to just quietly see it, acknowledge it, sit with it, think about it, try to identify it, and allow yourself to connect with the fact that it's there. Because if you react too quickly, you're not going to connect with it and the experience is going to leave you and you're just going to move on,
Yeah.
and in order to really learn and accept what's going on and get yourself to the fact that you have to do something about it and then strategically think about it and say, you know what? I was really manipulated or spoken to abusively last week. I've been sitting with it, thinking about it for a while, making sure that I'm not denying my own experience, really accepting the fact that I went through this. I didn't react. I didn't make a scene. I just am allowing myself to sit with it and accept it. And now that I'm connected with it, what's my next step? What am I going to do about it? How am I going to deal with this, in a productive way so that you're not creating drama and emotional scenes, because those don't work. They're not effective.
No.
But what am I going to do about it for myself? How am I going to try to make a change in the system? How am I going to perhaps approach this person in a reasonable way to make a difference, not just to scold them or go off the deep end about it? So I think that's where the courage comes in the first place sometimes is it's like it's a mindfulness thing. It's like, don't react. Like, yes, it's aversive and you feel it and you're triggered, but it's like, take a breath and don't react. Just try to connect with it so that you don't lose the fact that it happened. Because if you lose the fact that it happened, you're not going to do anything.
No.
And then when you don't do anything, you're going to be exposed to it more and more and more, and you're going to get conditioned to the abuse. So I think sometimes it's kind of counterintuitive. People think they have to address things head on right away,
Yeah.
but that's not the effective way to deal with it. The effective way to deal with it is to take your time and make sure that you're connected to it and committed to strategically dealing with it in an effective way and planning it out. That's what I think. Yeah. Not
Yeah.
everybody might think that, but that's what I think. Yeah.
And I totally agree with you. I totally agree. Definitely. Yeah. And it's hard. It's not easy to stop yourself in the reactions and thinking, what I need to do is actually close my mouth and start to think about this. How do I
Right.
feel about this situation? What is it like? Yeah. How do I want
Yeah.
it to be? For sure. No, I could not agree more, Jackie.
Yeah. I mean, when things happen too quickly, they come and go and they're gone. And then we lose the opportunity to really take charge of our own
Mm.
self and experience that courage because anybody can muster up the anger in the moment to
Oh,
like
yeah.
do something about it or to shut down. But I think the real courage is to say, how do I allow myself to sit with this uncomfortability and guide myself through the process of doing something about it, you know, so that it doesn't happen again or so that I'm aware that I might need to make some moves or some changes.
Mm. Yeah, reflection can be so courageous.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
because you're always gonna have the opportunity to address something, whether it's
Yeah.
today, tomorrow, or next
Yeah.
week. But if you are not mindful about it and you just react, well, then you're stuck with whatever that reaction yielded. Can't go
And have
back.
to deal with it afterwards.
You're right, right. Yeah, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna create another problem.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, Jackie, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. This has been, I wanna say, like, the most enjoyable conversation I've had in a very long time. It's
Oh.
just not to take anything away from any of your male listeners at all, but
No, no.
it's nice for, women, especially, we're all at the same stage of life, I believe even to be able to talk about these things is very empowering, and it's a
Mm.
rare space, so thank you for creating this space
Thank you.
for us.
Thank you. I so appreciate your wisdom, you sharing so openly about your journey, and also your experiences, being able to compare the situation in the corporate world or in the organizational world, we should say, with the cults. I mean, it's fascinating. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Margareta.
So where can our listeners reach you if they'd like to? And is there something else you'd like to mention before we close?
They can reach out to my email address. And if they need something specifically from ICSA, then, I can guide them there. But I would love to hear from people. And if it's more about contacting with me, professionally, I'll just keep the conversation going, of course.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you so
Mhm.
much for your contribution.
Yes. Yes. Thank you both.
You can find Jackie's contact information in the episode summary. Before we wrap up, think about this. What's one small courageous action you can take today? In this episode, we highlighted a challenge many leaders face. When the situation feels unclear, pressured, or even manipulated, it's easy to rush ahead or disconnect. But real progress begins when you pause long enough to see your reality for what it truly is. That moment of clarity is the turning point, and you are the only one who can choose what happens next. To help you take that step with confidence, visit my Courageous Leader Process program. It's a self-study program for those leaders who want deeper guidance, structure, and space to reflect and move forward with ownership. You can find all the links in the episode summary, and there you will also find Jackie's contact information. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who might find it valuable. You can DM me on LinkedIn and Instagram at Margareta Kull, or visit our website at courageous-leader.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts and answer your questions in future episodes. That's it. Thank you for listening. Dare to make a difference. Before we wrap up, here is the legal bit. You know, the fine print I need to mention. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I'm just your companion on this journey. I'm not a licensed therapist, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals.